evening. This is I have to tell you, my very first meeting chairing while not on camera. So I honest to goodness don't know what to do with myself, and we're gonna muddle through, all right? So I know there's a camera right there, but I'm not supposed to look at it, nor am I supposed to try to emote through the little tiny camera at the top of my computer.
Thank goodness.
Thank God, it's been rough. Okay, so welcome back to Semi-Normal. And we just returned from executive session, in which we discussed matters covered under Exception 3 of the Massachusetts Open Meeting Law to discuss issues related to collective bargaining or litigation, if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body. And the discussion pertained to the Medfield Teachers Union, Units A and B. So I will now call to order this June 17th regular session of the Medfield School Committee meeting. This meeting is being live streamed to the Medfield TV YouTube channel, Comcast Channel 12 and Verizon 36. And a recording of this meeting will also be posted to the Medfield TV YouTube channel. At this point, I will call for public input with the following statement. Citizens at this time may address the committee on items of school business not on the agenda. The committee will take such items under advisement without action or discussion at this time at the meeting at which the item is presented. Anyone? Going once?
You're on mute.
Yeah, no. And you don't have to raise your hand, virtual or not. Okay. So, as there is no public input that we can see at this point, I will start with the approval of the minutes. The first item on the agenda, do I hear a motion to approve and retain the minutes for the May 27th, 2021 executive session? Anna May, do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so the motion passes unanimously. That was, oh my gosh. I do roll call in my sleep now. All right. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes for the May 27th, 2021 regular meeting and the June 2nd, 2021 policy subcommittee meeting?
So moved.
All right, Leo, so move second.
Second,
Anna
Anna May.
May, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, unanimous. Thank you very much. We will have the, don't
minutes.
look at your watch, you're gonna make me anxious.
Usually takes 15.
All right, but this is actually one of the better parts of the evening, although it makes us, it's bittersweet. This is the 2021 retiree recognition. And I just have to tell you this now, I'm so happy I get to see you here. I mean, it'd be better at the school, but I get to see you face to face, and that's just amazing.
All right.
So,
We're going to go alphabetical order.
we are good. I hope that's here alphabetically too.
So our first retiree, Liz Curran. For 18
Liz.
years of dedicated service to the children of the community, the Medfield Public Schools, with deep appreciation, the Medfield School Committee, June 2021. You know, the high school had a really nice reception today for the retirees, and when they were characterizing Liz, they were talking about seeing this flash running through the halls. And Owen talked about how it's tough with her job because whenever she sees someone, that means something's not working right, you know? and that's true, but she's always there with a smile on her face, running around. And you know, one thing that she said today to everybody that was really, to me, typified Liz is that I wake up every day and I can't wait to go to work in the Medfield Public Schools. So with congratulations, and we wish you a long, healthy, happy retirement.
Thanks. I just want to say, Liz, that you have saved me through more school committee meetings, but also the day that I was pretending to be a high school freshman, and I was as lost as people 40 years my junior. And you helped me through that day like you would not believe. Every time I got confused, you just popped up right there. It was amazing.
I loved working with the school committee. I learned so much. You are so dedicated, all of you. I admire you a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks for your service.
Thank you. Okay, next.
Susan Cowell. For 37 years of dedicated service to the children and community of Medfield Public Schools with deep appreciation, June 2021. So Susan, because of her role as department chair for wellness, she's had a couple of receptions, lots of parties, as a K-12 person. One thing I can say about Susan is you always have to be on your toes when you're meeting with her, because she is the #1 advocate for student wellness and well-being, has done an incredible job in the years I've been here, so I'm assuming before I got here too. It's just been wonderful, great to work with, and we have similar interest in terms of wellness for kids and making sure that you know, we get that part of education right before we do the academic piece. So we're going to miss you. Congratulations.
Thank you. And I just want to thank all of you guys. I brought you a little something.
We did
Because
not.
in addition to Jeff always being very supportive, you guys have all individually and collectively been incredibly supportive and have always put children's physical and social emotional needs first. So
very much.
just a little remembrance to
Yeah.
not always use the computer, but sometimes take a pencil and paper and write
Oh, I
it
love
down.
it.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for your support.
Thank you. There's a special place on my desk. Thank you.
Nancy Deveneaux. For 28 years dedicated service to the children and community of Medfield Public Schools, with deep appreciation of Medfield School Committee. Come on up, Nancy. One of the things that I value most about Nancy is her advocacy for arts. And when she and I first met, she talked about sketch pads in 5th grade and why it was important in the budget to make sure that every kid had their own sketch pad. And I was skeptical at first, but you sold me on it because you were always advocating for kids. And I gotta tell you, you send the best cards in the district. The cards I get from you are the best, so I appreciate you. We're gonna miss you. Congratulations. Dale Duffy. For 21 years of dedicated service to the children and community of the Medfield Public Schools, with deep appreciation, Medfield School Committee. One of the things I'm gonna miss about Gail is being in a meeting with Gail. Because no matter what we're talking about, how serious or not, she always makes you laugh. And she always has we had some tense meetings, we were looking at some of the evaluation, redoing the tools, and Gail always has the ability to kind of bring it back, focus on what's most important for kids in instruction and learning, and always make us laugh. So we are going to miss you, and your department, your leadership in your department has been stellar. I know they're going to miss you, as we saw today. But we wish you the best, and hopefully, if you go down south, you enjoy your time down there.
I will.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Marie Hedberg. For 24 years of dedicated service to the children and community of the Medfield Public Schools. Now, Marie has been in kindergarten and has been the leader of that kindergarten team for a long time. Now, those of you that are in high school don't know what it's like to teach the little ones and to be on your toes the entire time and chase them around and run around and tie shoes and wipe noses and all that other good stuff that you do. Just a master at what she did for so many years. We're going to miss you, and the kids are going to miss you. Congratulations. Mary Jean Ingram, MJ, if you'd like to call her.
MJ.
MJ, for 27 years of dedicated service to the children and community of the Medfield Public Schools, with deep appreciation, June 2021. MJ is the backbone of that high school office, keeps everything going, keeps everything on time and in shape, and is the graduation extraordinaire. Graduation goes so well in Medfield because of all the work that MJ does behind the scenes, and we're all crossing our fingers we're going to be able to pull it off next year without you. So congratulations, we're going to miss you. And last but not least, Marie Pendergrass. For 25 years of dedicated service to the children and community of the Medfield Public Schools, a deep appreciation. So Marie, also at Memorial with the first graders, chasing those kids around. But Marie did something really special this year. She did an unbelievable, incredible job in her last year as the cohort D person from Memorial School. And I got more emails, and Christine got more emails of how great she did and how engaged kids were. And she, in her last year of teaching, completely flipped how she did her job for the previous 24 years and was just awesome. So congratulations, Marie. Enjoy your retirement. Can we just get a picture with everyone? Do a quick picture, Michael, if you can.
With spots?
Yeah, with the flags, would be great. Maybe over here, I don't know. Usually we do it in the library, we get lots of space.
Yeah, right there.
Right here?
You can put pants on today.
These have buttons.
Oh, in the back.
This is your day. Oh, wait, turn this way. Now this way, down below your face. Below your
Susan Callister in charge. Love her.
Don't forget to give me work for everybody. We got one day left. We still got one more.
Oh, yeah, we got 5 minutes.
That's right. All right, see you guys next time. Thanks so much.
Love to stay
Thanks
for
so
the
much.
assessment. Our grandson's big president. Thank you.
Oh, before you go, just a profound gratitude for being an exemplary example of resilience and grace. All these years. Thank you.
We will not use any of the bad words right now, like pivot or uncharted. Thank you.
I didn't say anything to you, did she tell you?
Or unprecedented. Uncharted or unchartered.
Did she tell you how I solved the problem?
All right.
All right.
Well, it's just so amazing to see people. I mean, I hardly know what to do with myself. This is great. So, the next item on our agenda is the end of year updates from the PTO, the MCPE, CPAC, and the Medfield Music Association. So, tell you what, I have Nicole Drummond listed first, so I will have her go first. She is the president of the townwide PTO. And, this is not like one of those things,
have to go over
you
here,
have
actually,
to
so I can hear
actually
you.
stand up.
Yeah.
Podium.
Hope you didn't wear your jammy pants like the rest of us.
It kind of will. We're not ready for buttons yet.
And, really, this is just an oversight. You have all, even though we have had such a funky year, you have all done things that are amazing, and your organizations have, or you have kind of stewarded your responsibilities so well through this period of time so that we know we can move on next year. So I just really wanted to have you here more as even an appreciation. But sorry I'm making you come with a book report too.
Well, thank you. So I want to take the opportunity, since others can view this, to really brag about the amazing volunteers that the PTO is made up of. They rolled up their sleeves like no year, and they honestly made, was it lemonade out of lemons, whatever it was.
Yep.
But we made it, and we're here. And I also, of course, the teachers, the staff, the principals, Dr. Marsden, all of you in the school committee. I mean, I cannot believe that we're now sitting at the end of all of this and this crazy, challenging year, but we're smiling, and I can see everybody's faces, so thrilled. So the PTO began the year with the assumption that we would have minimal fundraising. The theme of our first townwide meeting was to encourage all of the PTOs to think outside of the box. The year was unprecedented. We did not know what needs would be, but we wanted to make sure that the PTO really was going to be there to support the teachers, the students, and the schools overall. I'm really proud to say that between townwide K-8 PTO, the Memorial PTO, Wheelock PTO, Dale, and Blake PTOs, we were able to fund over $55,000 worth of grants.
Thank you.
And that includes grants, teacher appreciation, general requests, some of our highlights. I mean, it was fun to listen to everybody get creative. Townwide was able to fund the DLD, the mugs and the gift cards for the DLD day, or I guess that's part of the day, right? And the town came out donating gift cards like no other. It was amazing. We had K-5 mask lanyards for all students before they even went into the schools. Memorial did recess equipment and scholastic book flicks. They did yoga mats, and they did the multi-sensory word cards for reading at Memorial. Wheelock did a ton, almost $3,000 in pandemic supplies and support. They had, we did a joint funding with MCPE for the Red Cap microphones. And this year they did a community day, which was super fun. And they were able to honor all of the teachers with a barbecue and a cookout after their field day. And they also funded the third grade celebration. Dale, they were outstanding. Aside from like the playground supplies and everything else, they actually did an online performing arts. The Rhode Island Black storytellers were able to perform, and it got rave reviews. And they spent almost $4,500 in just reopening reopening supplies for the mats and the dividers that were needed to open safely, have the kids be able to have lunch outside, and everything was together. Blake had two larger grants. They did Newzilla, right?
Yeah.
Which is the instructional content platform. So it provided timely articles for the 6th and 7th graders in social studies, which personally my son benefited from, even though I can't pronounce it. And they did the attendance fee for the Pathfinders Winter Institute. And really, I have so many positive things to say. The only thing that we were kind of struggled with in the middle of the year was the annual PTO dues it was disappointing, but yet understanding. Everybody had an economic hit, and we completely understood that the donors were not going to be able to come out. So we actually only raised half of what we have raised in prior years, and all of that money is then distributed to each of the individual schools. So we had to, kind of be creative in what we were doing. So the PTOs they did their fundraising, they did friend raising, which is one of my favorite words. And townwide, we did a couple of Republic had reached out to us. We did barbecue events, and that was super successful. We added another bin at Dale so that it stops overflowing. So we got an extra increase in textiles. Memorial sold like all these like cookie decorating kits, and they did virtual painting classes and like other kits and stuff. Everybody was just, how can we help the community and yet raise some funds for the kids? And then Dale, which is people are still talking about, they did like the ghosting sign fundraiser, which was super fun. Virtual book fair. They had spring classroom. They did a spring classroom door decorating contest, which also my other son was like very excited about. So all the schools did a great job of getting parents involved by asking for donations of gift cards and money, and letting everybody, and communication was huge, and it was so great. And they made sure that all of those donors, whether they donated or not, but they were involved, how it was used and how it supported the schools. So, so I'm just so incredibly proud of the board members, and they had all these additional committees that we put together, and they made this year, honestly, the best it could be. And we have some really fun plans for next year, so we're very excited.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
Nicole. And Nicole, we just can't thank you enough. You and all of your cohort. Honestly, there's no way we can actually mention all of them by name, because it truly is the parent organization. And I've seen people just like literally pick up their bag and say, okay, let's go. Let's just start, in ways that I'm just so impressed by. So thank you. And please extend it to every person. Please do.
Nicole, your first words were, I think I want to brag a little bit, and I just would say, and I'm guessing, there's no reason to brag. We see it, and we absolutely love it, and we need it, so thank you so much. It's nice to hear it, but we know how important that. I've always said with us PTO, MCPE, all of us here, some of these though, when we need arms and legs or help or support, we know we have that, and it's really appreciated.
Absolutely.
Thank Absolutely. Okay, would the MCPE, Megan come on up? This is Megan Leshnick. Leshnick, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I knew it, but then I read it, and yeah.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you guys tonight. As you said, my name is Megan Leshnick, and I'll be president for MCPE for the upcoming year. Our board consists of individuals with a variety of interests, backgrounds, and skill sets. We raise money through a series of community-based events and activities, and then we give that money back to the schools through grants requested by teachers, staff, and administrators. These grant requests can take the form of public speakers, curriculum, tools, digital innovators, and facility enhancements, among others. We pay particular attention to the academic needs that exceed the parameters of the school budget. And we don't come up with the ideas that teachers do. We just find a way to make them a reality as long as they meet our mission. So our goal this year was to continue to do what I've just described. But like everyone else, we had to shift and get creative in order to continue to bring enrichment and innovation to the schools. So MCP's theme this year was One Medfield, and the mantra was really encouraging the community to come together, even when we were physically apart. So from the popular Medfield moves and driveway painting to the successful flower arranging, wine tasting, murder mystery date nights, our reimagined fundraising events embraced the One Medfield. Through the generosity of the community that made these events successful and the creativity and devotion of our teachers and administrators, we used money raised to fund 9 grants totaling over $50,000. And those grants such as Ladybug and Hue cameras, Red Cat systems, library additions, and a robotics reboot, to name a few. These grants really represent many unique ideas that improve the experiences of our K through 12 students under the categories of diversity, equity, and inclusion, digital learning and innovation, social, emotional, and STEAM education. And in addition to our traditional fundraising and grants, we also raised over $110,000 as part of our Onward fundraising, which raised money to help fund COVID-related expenses for the district. We also focused our energy this year on recognizing the amazing things teachers and staff continue to do, whether they were in the classroom or at home. So our Heroes Under the Mask was a social media campaign that we collaborated with the PTOs on, allowing families to share positive experiences that they were having that went above and beyond the normal roles of teacher and staff. So we were thrilled to receive enough submissions to post 1 nomination a day from November through March. And then we had May's Blue Ribbon Teacher Recognition Initiative, which honors teachers and school staff for making a difference in our students' lives. So donors received a special edition Blue Ribbon t-shirt along with note cards to write notes of thanks to teachers, bus drivers, specialists, any other staff members who made a difference in their year. And so lastly, MCPE would just like to send a heartfelt thank you to the teachers, administration, staff, corporate sponsors, and our community for allowing us to continue our mission to raise money to support the development of innovative programs, curriculum, and enrichment to the schools. And we're so excited and looking forward to next year when we can hopefully get back to some of our regular programming while keeping some of the community favorites from the past year. So thank you guys for letting me come.
So much.
Thank you.
I have been on the MCPE, and as has Anna Mae. And Tim, were you ever on? No. And I know that it is physically a difficult job a lot of the time, as well as just kind of completely intense and all-encompassing, and I really appreciate it. I do. I think we all do. I know we all do. So thank you. Bonnie, why don't I have you go next? Bonnie is from CPAC. This is Bonnie Marcette.
Thank you for the opportunity to come speak and share a little bit about what we've been up to during this interesting year. So, like so many organizations and boards this year, CPAC held their meetings virtually. And as a result, we saw increased flexibility in this format and allowed more attendees. So we actually had a max participation of just under 40 attendees this year at one of our meetings, which is huge for us. I think it also gives families with childcare needs, since so many of our meetings are in person, our presentations are in person, I hate using that word silver lining because all these terms, but yes, there was a positive there. While this was a challenging year for educators, administrators, and students, it was particularly challenging for our students with special needs. So Mary Brule continued to collaborate with CPAC throughout the year, attending all of our general meetings, and also meeting one-on-one with the board to help increase communication, collaboration, connection with families, and all the different formats of learning that we had this year. Some of the highlights that we were able to provide were a few presentations. Our first presentation of the year was we heard from Mary Brule, our new educational team leaders, and I say new, they were originally our team chairs, renamed educational team leaders. And they were able to come explain their role and sort of their vision for the year and be able to connect with families. And that's one of the things we talk about constantly. The more we're able to provide opportunities for families to hear, the more comfortable families feel to reach out and the more positive the results are. So that was an excellent evening. And again, Mary always is there for questions and answers at the beginning of each meeting, which is really helpful updates as things continue to shift and change throughout the year. We did also create a survey for families to complete, and that was, I think, very well received. We received 17 questions, 17 concerns, and 20 positive feedback comments. And again, Mary was able to go through with her team and really explain and answer all of these questions, which I think helps to alleviate a lot of stress that families are experiencing. We also had a presentation by the Massachusetts Sibling Support Network called No Sibling Left Behind. And it was actually a Medfield graduate who is now an attorney advocating for children with special needs, so that was exciting. She discussed what it's like to be the sibling of a child, a sibling of a sibling with special needs, and how to advocate for them as they go through schools and also just in the future as they transition into adulthood. And then we were also able to have a presentation. Meredith Becker, our out-of-district coordinator, and Stephanie Worthley, our guidance department chair, presented post-secondary transitions. So that was another presentation that we were able to provide, which was great. We were able to contribute to the Angel Run, to the Sibling Support Network. We funded Naja Riley's It's Okay Not to Be Okay presentation, the Best Buddy, Medfield High School Best Buddy chapter dues. We also put together a student services staff appreciation event where we gave gifts to every single member within the student services department and put up posters and just really tried to keep that positive energy during such a difficult year. And lastly, we offer over $2,000 in scholarships to our seniors. So I have a full report that I can pass out, but I also have it available on our website. So there's more detail if you're interested. Thank
Bonnie,
you.
I just want to highlight that CPAC is not simply for kids and families who have already been identified as being with special needs. That this is a resource organization, so that if you are at a point where you're concerned about where your child is educationally, this is a place where you can also go and speak in confidence. Although as in an open meeting, we do ask that people maintain a level of confidence and confidentiality within it. But it is a place that you can make connections and really be able to ask questions in a way that is not as formal as writing that official letter asking to be evaluated. Just trying to kind of understand where your kid is and what might be happening and where you can go from there.
No, I'm so glad you brought that
A
up. We always say
massive
all
help.
are welcome, but I think, I consider this one of my parenting villages, and navigating special education, even for the most experienced, educated person, is a very complicated thing for everyone. And so to try to be there for anyone who's having questions or concerns, their child is struggling, they don't know what to do, whether it leads to qualifications for special education or not, we hope to provide that. And certainly we have these meetings, but I think also just being here and hopefully being the face for, and as well as the rest of our board, for families who may just feel comfortable reaching out in the grocery store, that happens often, via text. And that was one other thing we did this year, is we advertised on social media our upcoming meetings, and I think that helped with attendance as well, so we'll continue to do that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bonnie.
Thank you, Bonnie.
All right, and Kathy O'Neill, who is here from the Medfield Music Association. And music has been complex this year.
Hello, my name is Kathy O'Neill. I have recently been elected as co-president of the Medfield Music Association with Jamie O'Loughlin. We replace Erica Beasler, whose youngest son just graduated, and Lynn Clifford, whose term limits expired, who transitioned off the board after leading the organization for the past 6 years. As a board, we thank them for their hard work and dedication to the MMA and the music program for the Medfield Public Schools. Thank you for inviting me to share the MMA's contributions to the Medfield music program during the 21-22 school year. Actually, that is wrong, 2021.
No, it feels like it though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure it is.
The MMA supports music education in Medfield, kindergarten through high school, through fundraising and volunteer hours. And in the middle of a pandemic, we are proud of what the MMA accomplished this year, thanks to our amazing volunteers, donors, and community sponsors. I would also like to thank the school committee, Dr. Marsden, Jason Bielik, and the entire music staff and the principals and staff at each school for their commitment to making the music program, for this year happen.
She's my sister.
Yes.
Kindred spirit.
Yep, their continued support and flexibility and creativity made music possible this year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I didn't cry at graduation. During this
Blessed
challenging
day.
during this challenging year, some of our traditional fundraising activities were not possible. Out of respect for our families and supporters, we took into consideration the current situation and suspended our annual appeal. However, we were able to hold 3 successful fundraisers. With a new focus on mask wearing, our year started in the summer with a successful mask and gaiter sale. Most were sold prior to the start of school. In November, we were able to continue our tradition and held our annual wreath and bulb sale. And our third fundraiser helped us achieve a very important objective, which is to form a fond connection between the young children and families, the music program, and the MMA. Had it not been for our Build a Snowman Storytime virtual event, the opportunity to make this connection would otherwise have been lost this year, with the cancellation of Spaghetti with Santa and Friends. Through our fundraising efforts, we were able to provide $2,500 in funds to the high school music program to purchase concert attire for the ensembles that would be used then returned to the school at the end of each year, much like the sports uniforms.
Good.
The purchase of the concert attire will lift some of the burden from our music families who were previously required to cover the entire expense, sometimes multiple times. This has been a goal for the music program since Jason Bielik became director. As the school year comes to a close, we distributed a little over $7,000 in scholarships, merit awards, and some need-based awards to our student applicants through a blind application process. This leaves us in a strong financial position for the start of next year. To round out our year, we were able to recruit an increased number of new board members and have installed a new leadership team ensuring future strength and viability of the organization. In 2022, the MMA celebrates 50 years of successfully supporting the music program in Medfield. We hope to celebrate its continuation as a living, breathing organization which contributes to the music program and music family needs and pivots to incorporate new perspectives, processes, opportunities, and goals. We look forward to working with the music department and the administration to provide continued enrichment to our music students. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy, I know this sounds like a small thing within the realm of music, but I think that one of the things that you talked about brings the possibility of music to more kids than you will ever realize, which is the concert wear. Because that is an equity issue. It's a financial equity issue, and it's about inclusion and being able to bring everybody in to music. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. And I'll get a little of a clump now if you'd like me to.
Well, anybody that sews, we are looking for people to help sew on hem the pants.
Anybody who sews is smart enough not to tell you.
We sent to village cleaners as well.
Thank you, Kathy.
All right, thank you,
Thank
all of
you.
you, so much. And I appreciate you giving up part of your evening again but it's so wonderful to actually see you in the same space as we are right now. So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Any other input or?
Can't thank all these
Yeah,
organizations
thank
enough.
you.
This past year has been, you know, it was a bright spot, you know, throughout this crazy roller coaster. So, every time they kept the pipeline full of fresh things to distract us all from the chaos. So we appreciate that.
So much so. Thank you. All right.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Yeah, yeah.
You can leave, you can stay, whatever you want to do. Christine is about to enthrall us, and I'm not kidding, with our student learning assessment update. So, Christine, this is the end of year student learning assessment update. Christine Power is our Director of Instruction and Innovation. And Dr. Marston, do you have any comments before Christine begins her presentation?
Yeah, I would say, Dr. Parr has worked really hard on this. She has met with lots of teachers at all grade levels, looking at data and meeting with them to go over, what the status is of learning and where we are in terms of curriculum for the year. So I think she's ready to show her presentation. There's a lot of good information on this.
And one of the reasons I think that we all really wanted to have Christine here so that we could understand where there are places that we as a district need to focus on, and the parents know where we need to focus after this year, because we can't say that we may have come through on the other end, but every experience affects us in one way or another, and I'm interested to see where the data is.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Thank you for having me here today.
Absolutely.
Wow, it's been quite the year.
A humdinger.
Yes, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. The last time I was here was back in December, and we talked about the data catches that we had up to that point, and thank you for the opportunity to come back to really see where we've been since December. But thinking about all the happy smiles and where we are now with no masks, I have to bring us all back a little bit. I'm going to bring you back to December, January, February. I know.
Yeah, that's the data, man. You got to do it.
If you remember at that time, all over the media, report after report after report about student learning. You heard terms like COVID slide, learning loss, the lost year. This is an example of a Time magazine cover story from late March, I believe, really talking about, in really dire terms, what learning in American schools would look like. Now, this was interesting because if you remember back in December, we were looking at our initial data catches saying, that we were hearing lost year, but our initial data catches weren't really saying the same story. So at that point, Dr. Marsden asked me to take a deeper dive and really investigate what does learning and teaching look like? How did the pandemic impact Medfield Public Schools? So initially I did a lit review looking exactly at what are they basing these stories on. And it's interesting, at that time, and think about it, these started coming out December, January, February. We're in the midst of the pandemic. I'm reading where they're coming from, and it's really interesting. The stories were based on studies that were placed on summer learning loss studies. Well, true that data indicates that there is some learning loss, but if you think about what a summer is, there's typically not schooling going on at that time. So people were taking summer learning loss studies and saying this is the same thing as what's happening now. They're discounting completely the concept of hybrid learning, synchronous learning, et cetera. They're really focusing on the fact that there'd be no learning at all. So that was like one thing. Another thing was that there were some initial studies that were based on broad data catches, those really large Ns, which were surveys of teachers that were national across all different school contexts, all different grade levels, et cetera, which were helpful. But however, thinking about all the different types of school contexts and thinking about how schools reopened in the United States, this patchwork quilt of different schools. Some schools didn't open, some schools opened right away, some schools had hybrid. It really didn't call to what was happening, what we were seeing in the initial data sets. So at that point, it's that we realized that we needed to pick up our own data and really see deeply what's going on. So in order for us to catch the Medfield school experience. So two major research questions and then a couple of sub-questions on that. First major question when I went out to really pull these data was to look at what does classroom instruction look like over this past year. 5 different schools, multiple different classrooms. Let's see really what's going on in that. And then as a sub-question on that, were teachers able to achieve the same curriculum objectives as previous non-years? Looking at the curricular expectations, were the expectations met in terms of the Mass State frameworks? The second question I looked at was how was student understanding impacted by the pandemic? We understanding that learning and teaching definitely changed, but how did students' understanding, how was that impacted? So looking at unpacking that a bit and understanding how well students know how how teachers knew how their students performed. So 2 sets of data were collected. One was the quantitative data. These are the things that I mentioned back in December. These are our tests that, and standardized tests that we catch on a regular basis, and I'll talk a little bit more later on that in this presentation. The other piece that was added on to this was I did interviews and focus groups with over 50 Medfield educators, everyone from pre-K up to grade 12. The interventionists, special educators, you name them, I interviewed them, and that was a gift. I'm going to say that was an unbelievable experience, and I'll explain why. But to have these conversations with these educators, for them to describe what was going on in their classroom, what they were seeing, how they understood how students were learning, to discuss their curricula. These are things that they've been really with. They've been doing their teaching and their experiencing all throughout the year. And to sit down and to share their experiences was tremendous. So a number of interviews through since late March from my last interview wrapped up just about a week ago, really capturing what those experiences are. And they provide a tremendous level of nuance to the quant data that we already have. So my first question was, what does classroom instruction look like? Well, classroom instruction, as we all know, evolved quite a bit over the year. I don't have to tell this group, everyone knows it went from hybrid, synchronous, in person, and also the evolution came in a staggered place across the district. So it wasn't the same. This goes back to the original calls where they're saying that when people were making assumptions of what the learning year looked like, they made a one-size-fits-all model, and that's when I realized pretty quickly that that's not going to fit even within our district, a small district. We had this staggered experience. The other thing is that came through time and time and time again is the level of collaboration that happened. We have a model that had been completely upended. I know when Jeff was introducing Marie, I believe, talking about her years of teaching and then all of a sudden having to flip after 24 years to the 25th. That's happened throughout the district. And so how our teachers problem solved that was pretty amazing. They relied on each other in ways that the words cannot describe that. They worked together focusing on the concept of power standards. And power standards are really looking at what are those learning skills that are learned by students that provide the most leverage and it's really most important for foundational pieces to go forward. The other piece of that is they also looked at the breadth of a typical curricula and looking at those sections in terms of what should be prioritized and what should not be prioritized. Knowing the fact that, and you talked about this at the onset of your meeting, that the pace, everything was just a little bit slower than normal and how the pace sort of unfolded and the I'm going to use the word, pivot, that happened over the year. The teachers worked and looked at the breadth and the depth in terms of where should we focus our energies on, what should we really go deep on, and what are the areas that maybe we're spending already too much time on and that we need to narrow that. So that happened there. And so that's an example on the right of the curriculum map of that was done for this past year, really looking at the span of that, and this was done throughout the K-12. I love this picture. Again, one more thing about, or a couple things about classroom instruction, what it looked like. Teachers went in looking at this from a student's perspective. What was the experience of the pandemic from a student? And as a result of that, it was a more systemic approach to instruction. focusing on the student experience specifically of, let's think about how does a student engage with their teacher? Well, they realized early on, I'm using an example at the high school, that students receive communications in multiple different ways in a traditional classroom. So in a traditional non-pandemic, a teacher may give an assignment either verbally on the board, handing it out, might be sending things via email, might have a Google Classroom. And so this is an example of how the teachers problem solved with the administrators of, let's think about ways that we can systematize, standardize this experience, understanding that things are sort of topped, especially in September, we have the 2 cohorts, we have people coming in, and again, the model completely changed. How can we standardize the experience to make it easier for the student? And so just one example of many was the standardization of use of Google Classroom. And it's not only the expectation of Google Classroom as a platform to unify the learning experiences and having all the assignments placed on there, having the information coming through there. That wasn't standardized prior to the pandemic.
The initial shutdown really taught us this one.
Yeah.
So, the April, May, June timeframe of the initial shutdown really illuminated the fact that we need to standardize that across the grades. And Christine and administration and worked with the teachers in the summer to really try to get that to where we needed to standardize that across the board.
And it wasn't just using it, it's also standardizing the use. Where are things posted?
Right.
How is it used? So that's one example, but there were other examples. The use of curriculum maps, curriculum calendars that came out of the elementary school, phenomenal. Of looking at a way of displaying the curriculum objectives by the lesson goals, and then what is happening, and then sharing that out. So not only does the grade level have that, but also all the specialists, all the relateds, everyone in the building knows what's happening in the classroom at any time. Again, things that hadn't happened before, but evolved.
Making that public too, right?
And yes, really tremendous. Another thing I don't have to say is the increased use of technology. And I will say it's more than Zoom. This example, I love this picture, is a student using Book Creator to describe Monsters Roar. And so many phenomenal uses of technology. I've been privileged to see the work that has come out of teachers' classrooms and to think about where they came from. And we had many educators who were really using it well prior. But talk about universal use of technology. I meet regularly with the tech integrationists, and we all just sort of looked at each other saying, we got what we want. Everyone's using technology. It's phenomenal. And it is how to use it well, how to leverage deep learning. It is not about just adding, a slide or something. It is really thinking about the connection about technology and learning and instruction, and really thinking about this on a really deep level. The amount of professional development, I will say, the tech integration team and the teachers who also helped with that, I really have to give them incredible gratitude, how they came together and really supported as a collective team, providing a lot of the professional development to support the teachers in the district. Again, another photo I absolutely adore.
Yeah, picture of the year.
Yes, this is phenomenal. This is Ethna Stover, and she took her kids outside. This is one example of this. Use of alternative learning spaces outdoors. Ethna wanted to teach singing, and with the pandemic, not allowed. If you walked by any of our schools at any time, you would see our students out there, and they were outside a lot. And the pandemic really opened folks in their eyes to the possibilities of using the outdoors as an additional learning space. Science, literature, music, I can go on and on and on. Really helpful for project-based instruction, real-world learning. It was memorable. Sue Cowell, I wish she was still here. Sue, I sat in her office. She talked about how, she had 37 years, how the pandemic made her rethink about wellness at the elementary level. Kids have snowsuits. Why aren't we taking the kids outside? during winter. And she described in incredible detail of all the different things that are possible in wellness that kids can do outside and meet all the learning standards that are expected for wellness. And it is just this door. She said, if I had more time, we continue. It was just magical. So that's just another example. One interesting thing, I know we always talk about Zoom. A number of the teachers, a lot of them talked about how Zoom, especially in parent conferences, were particularly powerful. You had parents who had, for work obligations or just getting away, found it really difficult sometimes to come to in-school events. The parent conferences, they said, was a game changer to have that opportunity to meet with parents. And having both happy conversations and also deep conversations. It was really, they found a very good experience. And then other opportunities, guest readers. They had opportunities to have from not only here in Medfield in a lot of the elementary schools, but also from outside Medfield, people to visit the class via Zoom. Really great. So, next question. Were the teachers able to achieve the same curriculum objectives as previous non-COVID years? Been working with the grade level leaders as well as the department chairs, the administrators, really looking deeply at the Mass State frameworks and making sure that we're achieving the expectations. Because unlike last spring, this year the expectation was we need to hit it all as if it was a non-pandemic year. And you see that bright in red because I can actually say, by and large, yes, we did. And that happened because of the streamlining that occurred, the universal use of power standards, really being thoughtful about curriculum and really being thoughtful about time is precious. I think that came through time and time again. People either overtly said it or they inferred it, saying how magical classroom time is, and let's be thoughtful on how do we use it to leverage it really deeply. Now, there were a few caveats, and keep in mind that time was precious and it wasn't as many hours of face-to-face as we had in a typical year. So you have these examples of trade-offs of what really happened. So you had, for instance, reduced opportunities for collaborative play in early childhood classrooms. I heard that tremendously from the pre-K up to the grade 3 teachers and even grade 4 and 5. I would even say, I would argue that even the secondary teachers talked about the social connections that were lost. So specifically, I'm talking with the younger grades now. They talked about how play, something fundamental to the experiences there, was lost because of the pandemic and what the requirements were. You had kids who couldn't be next to each other and couldn't share and play as to the level as that they would. But the trade-off was that they said, you know, because there wasn't play, we did a lot more in depth on the academics. So that's just a really powerful thing of, it's not good that it was missing. However, you also have this tremendous focus on the academics in that time frame. Another example of concerts, I spoke to Jason, and I walked from the high school. It was a day you could see people are bundled up, and I would watch him, and this would be common, see him bring all his band kids out, and they're on the basketball courts. And I snapped a picture because I'm like, wow, this is 2021. This is what band instruction would look like. He talked in deep about the loss of concerts and how powerful that was. But he said, we also focused on core skills. So that was just this trade-off. There was reduced focus on hands-on learning, for instance, the FOSS kits, the science kits. But they ended up using other technology, used software instead that hadn't been used. So there was these examples of these trade-offs. So this is a list that I'd been keeping when I collected these data from the teachers themselves of really what are areas for additional focus. And you'll see right there, and it is definitely underlined because this is something that was consistent, is the social interaction. We really need next year to be thinking about providing our students opportunities for social interaction, collaboration, sharing. This is something that we're seeing grade after grade after grade, and it's fundamental to the student's experience. There are other things that you may or may not have thought of at this point. Handwriting's one of them. You have so many kids typing that your basic handwriting skills may have atrophied. Mine may have atrophied long ago, but that's something that really to focus on. I mentioned this before, that hands-on science lab FOSS kits use, and that's throughout the grades. More and more depth needs to be placed on the science labs. The science really took a hit in terms of that ability to do some labs. Makerspace activities, unfortunately, in large, didn't happen throughout the most of the pandemic. The reproduction unit, that's something that wouldn't be appropriate to do on Zoom, so that is being rescheduled for next year when it's face-to-face. The math concepts was really interesting. I had a conversation with the math team just a couple days ago about this, looking at sets of data and seeing that, hey, you know, the numbers, and I'll talk a little bit more about going through the quant data with you. But we looked and like, hey, you know, the measurement and the measurement data standard is not quite what it should be. And what's this about money and time? And we problem solved it as a team, and it's really interesting. But the measurement and data, an example of this, is that yes, the teachers definitely covered it. They taught this in their classroom, but the reinforcement piece didn't happen. And that's because of a couple things. First of all, measurement and data, you have kids with rulers and trying things out. They didn't have that opportunity to do that. The other thing is that that's typically reinforced in science. So if you're not having hands-on science experiences, you're not measuring things in a beaker or using that piece. So that's just a layer of, okay, we understand what's going on. Money and time are example of standalone units that aren't part of that spiral part typically of the math curricula. And so in that process of really looking at power standards and where to prioritize, the focus was creating foundations so kids can definitely spiral upward. And so those money and time, although that they were attended to, wasn't quite at the depth that we'd like, and we're gonna make sure to circle back on those. Just a couple of things, the 3D unit, again, that's something hands-on in art. And then I mentioned before with concerts and singing, again, just the complexities of music instruction, incredibly challenging during this time. So, how is student learning understanding? The overall impact of the pandemic still being determined. Now, so a couple things to be aware of. Some skills and experiences are not evaluated by standardized tests. SEL is one of them. There's a number of them that's not. And the pandemic protocols prevented some assessments from being administered, especially we had cohort D, an off-site cohort. So we had to really think about how to catch data and making sure that it's equitable for everyone. We have more data sets yet to be analyzed. I had as recently as today at noontime a conversation about data. We still have data sets coming in, so I'm going to be giving you a taste, but the analysis will be ongoing. The qualitative data, so that's the interviews and the focus groups with the 50+ educators. That really strongly indicated that there needs to be more focus on the social-emotional learning of our students. Really thinking about this, and this is across the district. Sharing, collaboration, peer relationships all suffered during the pandemic. There was really stymied socialization opportunities. The cohort model, where we had cohorts of folks that are typically in the same class were separated by alphabet. So you had friend groups and things like that separated, and that definitely impacted some. The clubs, Jeff Sperling at the high school talked about how just the not having students able to meet was a real impact as well, but those are just a few examples. And then the other thing is many people talked about new students in the district and how tough it was for them with the mass and coming in to the district. So something to think about in future years. The quant data. I mentioned this last time I was here. We have a number of different ways that we catch data. And these are just a few. And so I'm going to be talking specifically about math and literacy tonight. So our literacy assessment, we use the Lexia Core 5. Now this is the first year we use this, and I mentioned this before, and that is because our traditional assessment, the BAS, was not something that was really amenable to pandemic assessment. It did not allow us to do students off-site, and also just because the proximity between the teacher and the student, we couldn't do that. So keep in mind it's a single data set, so that did not allow us to look at previous years. But it does allow us to look at standardized, it's reading, specifically based against reading standards. And it provides an individual student and also a grade level of analysis. So this is some initial catches on terms of the Lexia Rapid. This is end of year performance, and you're seeing specifically with Lexia, it goes down and it drills down into specific skills, and along the right-hand side there, you'll see how our students are performing on specific skills. So we have a number that they're doing quite well. This is against at or above, and this is the percentage of students achieving at grade level. So things like phonological awareness, 99%. So a number of things that students are doing very well in, word reading, K-2, vocabulary pairs, following directions, vocabulary knowledge, syntactic knowledge, all of them doing really well. There's some areas I'd like to really drill down on. It was spelling, word recognition, and reading comprehension. And so right now I'm looking at this, again, initial deep dive, looking for other sets of data to help me really unpack that. And just some examples that we can be looking at is when the next sets of data come, we can look at, is this a curricular issue in terms of, is there a curriculum match between this or a gap? Or is this something with instruction, or when the test was even given? So for instance, the assessment could have been given, and it was given, the most recent catch was given in May, in May and early June, and the unit could have been after that. Math. We have two sets of data that we collect, the benchmark and the Renaissance Star. Both have been used for a number of years. Here's our littles, our kindergarten grade 1. They did great. We had you can see the performance there. Counting cardinality, operations and algebraic thinking. Our students are doing really well. I do have a story about that geometry on grade 1. We had Carrie Sperling, our reading interventionist at Memorial, talk about that. And she said, geometry. Christine, I think I know what happened. She's like, what? She's like, hexagon. I'm like, what? She's like, hexagon. The kindergartners, they needed to, for geometry, recognize the different shapes. And they would say agon, but they wouldn't say hexagon, so they couldn't get scored. It was just like the vocabulary thing. And she said they knew, they were like they were trying to say it. So she's like, Christine, I know they know it. It's just a vocab thing. Oh, I'm so sorry. The numbers are a little small. This is looking in aggregate of using Renaissance Star data and specifically looking at our students' performance against benchmark. What you'll see here is that in most of our grades, our students performed at or above benchmark at least 80% of the time. There is one area in grade 3 that we're going to be investigating. We're going to be investigating it all, but that's just one area. But the students overall at or above in between between grades 2 through 5, we had over 80% of our students perform at or above benchmark. And I'm going to be talking about drilling down and how those are just in aggregate and what's going to be happening in the next couple of weeks in terms of these data. So the data itself, looking at these large cross-grade aggregates in school is great, but the real power of that is really drilling it down and looking at it in more details. So what I'll be doing over the next couple of weeks is a couple of things. One, as I mentioned, I literally sat down with Jamie Callahan from the reading department today, and as these data were coming in, and breaking them down and really looking at these additional sets. We were fortunate to be able to do the BAS because of the lifting of restrictions. This is something we hadn't been able to do. And so we were able to do that catch of the BAS, which is great because it allows us a year-to-year comparison, which we couldn't do before. So I'm getting those data coming in, and we'll be definitely unpacking that and looking at what types of phenomena. I mentioned with geometry, for instance, is that we were thinking that's a vocabulary piece, but it could be that something could be, when it's taught, could be a gap in, or something with the curricula, and it was a lack of alignment. We need to figure that out. So it is and I'm going to be showing that in the next slide in a minute, but the goal is to make adjustments and when necessary, support any gaps in student learning. The information that I'll be doing this summer will be given to administrators, the interventionists, the specialists, and the teachers themselves to help inform next year's instruction. So this is where I geek out a little bit, because this is the power of some of the tools.
Before this was not where you were geeking out. You know, I'm sitting here eating this up.
Yeah, good. I know my data.
Geek to geek.
Data. Okay, so I know the numbers are small, but we can just go by the colors on this. Left-hand column. Left-hand column this is 5th grade, and it's looking at the math standards in math broken down each one. So this shows, this is our data actually, so we're shows in terms of standard by standard by standard by standard by standard. And you can see how our students in general have done. And so what I'm going through is I'm looking at each standard, and I'm looking for things like, what happened here? And you can see it quite clearly here in this example. The 1st and the 3rd standard, where it's very clear in red, indicates an area that I need to investigate. So at that point, looking specifically at what those specific standards represent, and then going back to the curriculum maps to say, what is this assessing? When was it taught? When was the assessment happening? And then going to the level of, let's look at the curricula and how was it taught? So those are the steps that will be happening across the grades, looking for those areas so that information can get in the hands of the building administrators, the grade level leaders, the interventionists, special educators, and everyone, so to make sure that we can make those curricular adjustments and those instructional adjustments going forward. Grades 6 through 12. So grades 6 through 12 is different because their assessments are different. They use common assessments that provide information on overall student performance. So what will happen going forward, we have kids who are taking finals right now, is that departments will review student performance data based on these common assessments and look and compare how the students have done this year to years past and looking for patterns themselves. What I'm really looking forward to in the fall and going forward is really looking at, through vertical teams, opportunities to not only unpack the phenomena that we see, but also to be able to share that. So it's not only 9th grade teachers looking at their 9th grade data. Well, that's phenomenal, but it's also important for them to inform, for instance, the 10th grade teachers, so they can inform years going forward. So if there's areas of focus, for instance, writing or analysis or that piece, that teachers going forward could be prepared knowing the cohort that's coming in. Okay, I know we weren't supposed to use this word. I think it was Bonnie who mentioned that, but silver linings.
I mean, the limit is July 1st.
Okay.
After that, no more.
Okay, I promise. You can't talk to 50 educators in this district without them sharing their experiences and really being incredibly reflective on how this experience has fundamentally changed their instruction. I think we've all been changed in some way. And so it's a privilege for me to share a number of these with you because it's been an unbelievable experience to reflect with teachers and really thinking about, because teachers are always thinking about how can they do things better, how can they improve, or what can they take away. And so I'm going to just share, there's so many. I try to keep it short for you. So the first grouping has to do with students. Their reflection on students is that they have definitely reflected, saying that students came out of this much more resilient and flexible than they had been. I've heard teachers talking about how that the pandemic forced kids to really think about like how to use Zoom or how to get their materials, et cetera. And it's something that they had normally would do, but because of the pandemic they couldn't, and kids rose to the occasion. They talked about quiet kids. I've heard this time and time again, how the small class sizes were really incredible when we were in the cohort model. And that allowed those kids who were quiet but engaged to really have the agency to speak and talk. They talked about their tech skills and how these second and third graders were just whizzes using the Chromebooks and even the iPads at the younger ages. Really blown away. And I can speak I'm blown away whenever I see my child, but I think people have noticed how well kids really adapted to that technology. And then that students were incredibly creative and really demonstrating knowledge. And the teachers' lessons allowed for that. Really thinking about, again, that student-centered piece of that, of how can a student demonstrate knowledge in a way, if you have one hand tied behind your back, you don't have that traditional learning environment. So let's use technology. Or when you're here face-to-face, what are ways that we can do it without having kids next to us, because the collaboration was difficult. And so students, in many cases, provided that opportunity. Relationships were tremendous. They talk about, you hear about that, like that metaphor of being in the foxhole with someone and who you're with to get through the crisis. They talked about how it's just been, the relationships they forged were just seared in their memory. They talked about how they got to know their students incredibly well. That through the small classes, and I can't emphasize that enough, the small class sizes, the Zoom, and allowing them to engage with students, allowed them to get this lens of understanding that they never had before, and so the level of empathy, it came through. That connection with parents, time and time again, talking about how parents partnered with them, and that was not lost on the teachers. The Zoom, I mentioned this before, the participation in conferences and meetings, the small class sizes, the teachers knew, and I've heard this anecdotally when I meet with parents, as well as from the teachers themselves, how I hear time and time again, my teacher knows my son, or my teacher knows my daughter incredibly well. And that is really a way to really get deeply and build the trust with the student in order to engage them. I mentioned the strong relationships with each other and how collaboration was just the norm. And again, if you think about what a traditional classroom and school environment is, it's typically likened to being an egg crate model where everyone's sort of on their own. And at that point, it's definitely not. It is the trust that formed between teachers was incredible, and how they relied on each other quite heavily. And then the other thing was, I love this, I had a conversation at Dale about this and a couple other places, and how, because the cohort model was smaller, you had these smaller groups, and it was sort of mixed up friend groups, that you had folks being friends that weren't in their typical friend group, and they talked about how boys were being friends with girls, and how it's just, you had this sort of different relationships that were formed. It was really nice. Learning and teaching. I mentioned this before, the more cohesion. Talked to the elementary principals, and they would say how they would walk down the hallway, and the lesson objectives were clear, that every teacher was really at the same point at the same time. And it was really thinking together about how to develop and implement high quality instruction. Expanded teacher collaboration across grade departments with the specialists. Development of universal protocols and scaffolds. I mentioned that with Google Classroom, but a whole bunch of more other things. The ed tech skills I mentioned before. PD I mentioned as well. And then the outdoor spaces, I cannot emphasize that enough. And finally, the willingness to take risks. Our teachers took risks. They needed to think about how best to support the child, and they went there. And they totally, in many cases, rewrote what they've done, in some cases for years, and it's tremendous. So heading into the last slide, thank you for the time, is areas of focus. Here we are, last day is tomorrow. And we've come through quite a year, and we are undoubtedly improved because of that, and we have some areas that we'd like to unpack and continue to go on. I mentioned this before, but I'm saying it again because it's so important to focus on SEL. It's something that we'll be working with the building leadership and the teachers going forward, of really having conversations on how best to support students' social and emotional experiences. There's that need for interaction, play, collaboration that needs to continue. Mentioned this, the curriculum, we need to focus on those, the area in the box, those areas that we need additional focus areas, and how best to integrate them well into the curricula. Looking at data, not only to capture data and making those adjustments I mentioned, but also reviewing our data systems themselves. Let's look at the data, is it capturing what we want, and then using those data to improve instruction. And the last, and definitely not the least, really super important, is all those silver linings. It's important to foster that environment that allowed that to happen. And I'm not wishing that pandemic on anybody, but more so, think about the environment where these technology skills developed, the PD that came, the collaboration, the curriculum alignment, the continuity. All of those happened in this really specific environment, and it's really our job to make sure those special good things that came out of it are sustained and continue in the future. So with that, thank you, and you allowed me to geek out on my data a little bit, so thank you.
That's great, thank you.
Oh, thank you, Christine.
Thank you,
This is
Yeah, thank
so helpful. And I think none of us here think, or I think that we can't really overemphasize how important social emotional learning is going to be for next year. One, to really keep those kind of friendships that came out of the small groups and those kind of kids who were able to do that, and that kind of feedback around smaller class sizes, around using the natural environment as a classroom, about being able to have those informal relationships between teachers.
Yes.
And collaboration across, and you were talking about vertical learning and how we really kind of take learning from second grade to fourth grade to fifth grade and up through Blake, and how those things happen. I mean, I just really, so much of that is truly just the emphasis of education in the future anyway, but the fact that we did end up all having this foxhole experience this year, which I think is probably about the best way to describe it, and how we were able to level up on that so quickly. Certainly speaks to our teachers' resilience and to their professionalism and how well they know what they are supposed to do. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You know, the collaboration piece is just really critical. I think, the literature has told us for years that collaboration with teachers is really an important part of the teaching and learning experience. And I don't think anyone does anything well when they're forced to do it, when they're told to do it, but it just organically just happened. Our elementary teachers started working together and saying, okay, you do this, I'll do this, and it just became the way they did business for the last 15 months, and it's been unbelievable. They've done an incredible job with it.
And
And
actually,
the departments have been doing it for a while too, because, that's kind of the nature of what secondary is. But with elementary, when you're in your own classroom, self-contained, sometimes it's not easy to do that, and I think they just did an incredible job with that this year.
Yeah.
I can't speak the volumes of the impact that having that standardized curriculum across the board, having it publicized so that parents can support and scaffold that learning at home as well. I mean, incredible as well. So, and we know all of our parents, stepped up and did the best they could, with what they were given. But again, it's not the tool, but it's what the tool does, right? It makes that information available. I know when Henry has an assignment due and he didn't finish an assignment, so we can work with him at home and submit it to Google Classroom and so on and so forth. So, just that flow was very, very powerful, making that homeschool connection. So.
The one thing I also want to talk about in terms of the in terms of time and how you're able to use it efficiently. One of the things that I've seen this year is that if your child is in trouble or stumbling before things go really badly, I know people have been in a position where they literally call their team chair, or whatever we call them now, if they're on an IEP, and
I
boom.
still call them team chair, by the way.
Do we call them team chair?
No, we don't, but I still call them team chair.
You team, okay.
I still refer to them as
I
that.
just
I've always
called
referred
them
Yeah.
Mary, and, but you can call and say, I think things are going a little south here or something. You know, like there have been a lot of examples of this, and you have a team meeting. I mean, faster than you ever had it before, and it's not just at the elementary level. It's that you're getting 7 people in the room at the high school, you know, and so there's a collaboration there with the Zoom that has been able to make things so much more flexible for kids in a way that, you know, everybody hates being on Zoom. We've joked about it an enormous amount tonight, but there are real
Some good benefits.
benefits
No
to it.
doubt. No doubt.
Yeah.
I just have, it's borderline rhetorical question, but like with the first area of focus on SEL, I know like Dr. Worthley's not here. As a data geek, how do you look at it? How do you think about it in terms of how do we measure? You know, like Dr. Worthley said, hey, we look at the number of cases, you
Right.
know, but I'm just, the cases say, okay, yeah, there's a problem, then how do you zero in on where? You know, and I'm just, it's again, I call it rhetorical, but I just love
Right.
a couple sound bites on how you think about it.
I think the qualitative data says a lot. As again, you have standardized and you have the qualitative data. He has his, of course, looking at cases, and I had an opportunity to speak to him for this project as well. And so he compared the experiences that he had in terms of last year versus this year, and then looking at the students in terms of how many crises, how many that needed certain interventions, how many came into RISE, for instance, and using that way of sort of measuring last year versus this year. And so that would be ways of just one way of really assessing that in terms of the qualitative data also provides that other piece in terms of what are teachers seeing in terms of behaviors. What are some of the expectations for collaboration for play that would be present in a typical year, and if they're absent, that would be areas specifically to focus on. So that is looking at, again, capturing and not only within this work, but also the individuals within the schools of capturing what the teachers are seeing in their experiences, and also with Dr. Wordley and the great guidance team.
Because I don't, let's say it almost, it's intuitively we all know there's problems. It's kind of like, hey, how do we segment? You know, where are they and how do we address them? We're not going to solve it now. It's just that's what
There are SEL surveys that are out there, you know, that you can look at and administer to certain grade levels, and they're benchmarked off of other communities, and you can kind of see where you are benchmarked with that. So we had done a panorama survey here when I first got here years ago, and they're the company that's really taken over the SEL surveys, you know, and they do that. Our Metro West tells us an awful lot, 6 through 12, what's going on. But yeah, you're right. I mean, there's a lot of anecdotal and a lot of conversations that go on at the building level when they have the meetings with every building calls it something different, but you know, the teams that meet every week to kind of talk about kids that could be in crisis or having difficulty, and sometimes they're a part of that, sometimes they're not. So I think, you know, that we keep a pretty good thumb on that, but in terms of the data, I think you probably need to do some sort of survey that really tells you beyond what Metro West tells us and where we are with SEL as a baseline.
And I think that there are probably data points that would work pretty well on axes, you know, right? So that you have kids who are coming in who have new 504s, who, you know, perhaps need that level of service because of a depression diagnosis or an anxiety diagnosis or something that is affecting their ability to be in school. Kind of where has that gone? What are their grades throughout the year? What are the kind of data points around that? So that's some really granular stuff, and kind of what grades those kids are in, right? Where did they stop? Had they been identified before? And so there's a lot of kind of data that we could probably dig out. It also, you know, does the qualitative data already identify that for us? So, you know, kind of just the broad spectrum stuff. And then there's the deep dive, but with both of those things essentially identify the same thing.
I think
It's tough to
the
know.
real concern over the last 15 months in many districts, and my colleagues are all saying the same thing, is that some of the issues that we're seeing are kids that weren't on the radar before.
Right.
You know, so that's the real concern.
And still aren't.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
there are so many who are suffering in silence. You know, some of these conditions, they're hidden so well, and our
Right.
kids are so good at hiding them. So that's
Till
my
they're not.
worry.
Right.
But I think, and please correct me, but isn't there a grant that the coalition funded for the Medfield Coalition for Suicide Prevention to have Jim Macaulay do gatekeeper training for staff?
Yes.
So
Yes.
to
We've had
me,
one
that
round.
is such,
We've had one round already, a
Yes.
couple years ago, but I think we're coming back next year
because
for another
again,
round, yeah.
these are hidden in
Right.
plain sight, and if we can train more of our, frontline people,
Right.
hopefully, because, yeah, it's a huge worry,
Mhm.
This is just but I appreciate all the work, that has gone into this, and, my question is really kind of tuning into that parent conference piece,
Yeah.
which is, obviously, a huge silver lining, but, is there talk I know for years now, we've talked about Blake doing teacher conferences, and I'm wondering if, again, we're not gonna answer this tonight, but planting a seed or probably watering it a little bit more, could this expand to Blake?
Yeah, I think one of the things that actually Christine and I met with Nat last week, and we're looking at some of the strategies they're gonna use to address her last report on standards-based reporting. One of the items that we talked about, and it's on the agenda for this summer to work through, is getting that in place, is to work, and maybe, looking at one whole grade level first, and just do a whole grade level and
Yeah.
kind of year to year do that. But I think we've talked, you and I have talked about this, I mean, this is a really important thing, and I think, quite frankly, you can do it at the high school level too, if you really can. I mean, I've seen it done at the high school level, and it takes a little bit of rethinking kind of how you operate, but you can do it there as well. So I think those are things that we're definitely looking at, and in fact, one of the conversations we had is a lot of the concerns around SPR. If you had two parent conferences a year, and you sat down and had those conversations, there may not be as much concern around SPR, and maybe a deeper understanding of why
Completely.
it was done. So I think that's one of the areas that we're looking at.
And that's just another step for the, in terms of the SEL work that we do,
Mhm.
having everybody on the same page,
Right.
because parents see one thing, teachers see another, and just to have those conversations. So,
Wonderful.
good, thank
I-
you.
Christine, because I like you so much, if we could kind of touch back in the early fall, when
Yeah.
we understand what's happened at the high school level on the same depth in
Yep.
terms of the assessments, I think that would be really
Okay.
helpful. I have no idea specifically what that date is, but I'd certainly I think the committee would certainly like to have that information. We
Sure.
definitely
Sure.
have it
Absolutely.
in the fall, okay?
Be happy.
This is really an important thing to keep on top of.
Absolutely.
Make sure that we're able to put our budget priorities around it as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you to the
Appreciate
teachers as well for just allowing me to speak with them and for the work that they've done. So, thanks.
Indeed, thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. Dr. Marsden, do you have other items since posting on June 15th?
I do not, Madam Chair.
Okay, then we will move on to old business.
So we have one donation for old business.
Okay,
I ask that you approve the following donation, which is a $100 anonymous donation to the Blake Middle School Theater Program.
okay. Do I hear a motion to accept this donation, as stated by Dr. Marsden?
So moved?
All right, and do I hear a second?
Second?
Okay, and all in favor? Aye.
Thank
Well,
you.
for that. The motion passes unanimously. Okay, and then the next item on the agenda is the Madeline L. Grant Scholarship recipient.
So in your materials, you had the information for the Medfield 2020 graduate Cole Young. In order for the money to be released for a scholarship of $3,000, you folks need to vote to approve that. So I ask that you vote to approve the $3,000 to be released so that Cole Young can get his scholarship.
So moved. And second?
Second.
Second, all right, and all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and
Thank
that
you.
motion passes unanimously. Okay, Dr. Marsden, Anna Mae, or, Leo had to leave. Do you have, the next item on the agenda is the new elementary school project update? Do you have
We had,
anything we'd like to talk about? or-
we had our community forum on Sunday. It was really well attended, I thought, and we tried to address some of the concerns that folks had, and they had a really good question and answer period as well. I think we were anticipating 2 hours, it was 3 hours, but it was 3 hours well spent. I think people, had a better understanding of what the project is about and what we're trying to do, and I think folks left there with a much better understanding of what's going on, but.
I agree. Yeah, and I think we're not going to stop over the summer. I think it's important that we still keep communicating
Mhm.
information out, and we have our next meeting this coming Wednesday on the 23rd, and I think that's going to be an important meeting as well, and then we'll have some community conversations throughout the summer as well.
Just a couple other meetings that we had. I met with the architects on Monday, and we spent about 3.5 hours going through different designs and reconciliation of costs and those kinds of things. And then yesterday, we had another meeting with the architects as we were going through what the classrooms will look like, because we had a design that Steve brought to the teachers, and then we brought to the architects, and we liked it, but MSBA didn't love it, so we need to kind of go back and retool that a little bit. So they brought 4 different options to us yesterday, and then we asked for bits and pieces of all 4, and they're gonna come back and give us another rendering either tomorrow or Monday. So it's pretty much ongoing every day. There was some piece of that we're working
So
on.
does MSB send someone? I mean, how do you know that MSBA didn't
So
like
our architects sent a drawing to them and asked them their opinion on it.
I see, okay.
Yeah, so just making sure that what we do falls under their parameters so it gets reimbursed, right, without increasing the size of the building.
Correct.
So that's kind of the goal that we're doing, and we wanna really make sure that, and it sounds trivial, but it's really important where the placement of the cubbies are in the classroom, whether it's inside or outside,
Right,
because we really wanna preserve that outside the classroom project space.
Yeah.
We saw that when we visited the school in Harvard, and we fell in love with it, and we're trying to preserve that without increasing the size of the schools, the square footage of the school and the square footage of the classroom. So that's what we're working with them on now, and they're doing different drawings or studies, as they call it. So we've looked at different models, and they're gonna come back with a new rendering for us.
Very good.
and this is an iterative process that happens with every
Mhm.
program, right? So
Oh,
that
yeah,
we
absolutely.
look, and then we
Right.
take what we like, move, and really kind of run it by our educators, run it
Right.
through the,
And that's the classroom piece. Then we still have the gym to do, we still have the stage area, the cafeteria, like all that. We're just trying to focus on to nail down that classroom piece to see what it will look like, because we need to have the 900 square feet of the classroom proper, right? Need to have that, but we wanna have project-based learning space outside the classroom, because we saw that in person in Harvard, and we liked it a lot, and we thought, based on what our teachers can do, they would really utilize that in a really good way. So we're trying to work with MSBA and our architects on that right now.
All right,
it's so interesting. I so wish that we could have almost a community trip or tour of what some of these spaces look like, because until you're actually able to see them, it's all just completely conceptual. But then you walk into the space and you say, oh, I completely get this. I understand, and I remember walking through, and I took pictures, and I'd look at the pictures, and I'd be like, but this still doesn't really give you the same message.
Yeah.
But then there are these like kind of little bugaboos about, okay, but we have to kind of subtract that space from the size of the classroom, and how do we do that? And so it's all that, it's kind of moving pieces, but I really do wish there was a community opportunity to be able to see what the possibilities truly are, and how very different it is, looking to the future of education than what we have here right now. And many, what we have is incredible, except for that one certain building, but even more so looking to the future 70 years down the road, how do we do space? How do we even learn? What are we gonna be doing even 25 years from now?
So I suspect they'll be sharing some of that stuff at the Wednesday's
Yes,
meeting.
yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, if you think about the size, and we went through all of the classrooms at Dale Street, and we were trying to get everyone back in person, so we did some of the measurements, you know, in most of those classrooms in Dale Street, like, were they 600 to 700 square feet, you know, most of them? So for our kids and our teachers to have 900 square feet and some project learning space in the hall, it's gonna be really something,
Yeah.
really something special for them, so,
Cool.
we're looking forward to that.
All right, I'm gonna open this up to public comment. If anyone would like to speak, please keep it to 3 minutes maximum. Anyone? No? Okay. Moving on, fiscal year 21 update. Michael, what do you have for us?
So, we've been working on, the last 3 weeks, trying to, close the fiscal 21 out. So looking at the payroll, which is, you know, 90% of our budget, 90% of our budget, with, you know, $30 million in payroll. We are currently, or about 25 million of that 30 million has been, spent. But what we have left is the last pay in June, which is, I believe, June 24th. We have the lump sum pay for, some of the unit members, and then we have summer payroll for some of our staff. So we're looking at, we have approximately, you know, we have about a little bit over $5 million still to expend in payroll, which will put us over, which we've been saying on the payroll side, but we're in better shape than we felt that we were last time that we reported. And that's because of the grants that we've used, and you know, the grant from the town that we were able to move some money into that grant. It's really truly helped us manage the budget this year with SO1 and SO2, and then the CARES Act. That's helped a lot. So
Just to that point, Michael, I know you've seen the information on ESSER 3, which is the next rendition. So we are not going to be applying for, we haven't applied for that. We haven't, we're not gonna apply to that probably until September, October. And that, the funds on that will give us some flexibility in future fiscal years, so that, you know, it's amazing when you see the money that was allocated in some of the bigger cities and bigger districts, ESSERs 1 and 2, where they're still haven't expended ESSER 1 or 2 yet, and we expended all that right from the beginning. But some of the numbers are so large in those districts that they have that flexibility. So we're gonna try to make that flexibility for us with ESSER 3. So we'll bring that and talk to you about it in you know, probably September, on what we think, because there are a lot of regulations around what we have to do and all that, much different than 1 and 2. So, but we felt like we were gonna wait until September, October to submit that.
Can you talk a little bit about what the length of the grant is, because there's a certain amount of impact it can have on the next
FY23,
fiscal
right?
year, right?
Yeah,
Right.
2023.
So that is something that we could, you know, assuming we get it and we're able to follow the regulations and kind of manage that, we'll be able to bank that into that next fiscal year when sometimes after a recession, things dip
so
in a way
it's
that's unpredictable.
gonna be data driven.
Mhm.
A lot of the, so it will be.
Well, we got data, we got a geek.
And then there's requirements such as 20% has to be spent
On
on
extent
learning
learning,
loss.
right, yeah.
There's a percentage that has to be spent on social emotional. So there's just, it's a little bit different than the first two, where we had more flexibility on,
Right.
you know, because of COVID, you know, PPE and stuff like that. I mean, one of the requirements in the ESSER 3 is infrastructure.
All the things that we already did.
Correct.
Yeah, everything we've already done with the
Yeah.
ventilation systems and all that.
Yeah.
Because you remember, it's a federal grant and looking at the entire country, and we still have districts that aren't even open yet, right? And it was related to, so this is, again, when it comes to the federal government, it's a wide swath of issues. So that was one of the requirements we have to do, so we're gonna look at that as well,
But in September, once we have more guidelines, we'll bring it to the committee.
Great.
So just on the non-payroll side, usually what happens is our June bills don't come in until July, which is the 30 days from when our invoices happen. So we're trying to track where our POs are, our purchase orders currently are, and then there's some items that don't fall under purchase orders, which is legal fees, it's utilities, certain special ed services don't fall under purchase orders. So we're tracking all that information right now, and trying to get those in by the end of July. So by our next school committee, we'll have a final numbers for it.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you,
Um,
Michael.
Do you have any public comment on that? Again, keep it to 3 minutes or less. Anyone? All right. Then let's move on, Dr. Marston, to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force, kind of, just a little update on that.
Sure.
Where we are.
So, we closed out our email response for folks that wanted to participate in that. We closed that out in June, was it June 11th? I think it was June 11th. So we're going through that list right now, and we're trying to make sure that we have a balanced list across schools with both staff and parents and community members. So that we're going through that list, and we're starting to pare that down. We should be letting folks know, not next week, the week after, sending out emails to let people know that they're gonna be a part of it, or thank you for applying. But we're just trying to make sure that we have a balance within the district as far as representation. We think that's really important. We're gonna be working with a consultant that is gonna work with the DEI task force, help with the facilitation of the meetings and that kind of thing. We thought it was important to have an expert in the area to do that as we go through the process. And we're looking forward to it. I think the folks that have been a part of Merge are really excited about it. They realize they all can't be on it, so they're gonna keep doing Merge as something that's important to keep having those monthly meetings and conversations. But yeah, we're on track to really start going to this work in September. So we'll be all set to go.
Did you get many applicants?
We got, do you remember what the number was? Let's say 26 or something? I don't wanna say a number because I'll be held to it, but I think
I
it's.
just wondered if you did get
Yeah.
a good
Yeah, absolutely, yeah,
of
absolutely.
people,
Yeah,
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 good.
so,
And I did have some people call me and really have very thoughtful conversations about how they could contribute and what, kind of really making sure that they were able to give the time to this work, so I think that there are people who are really engaged.
and some folks with some really interesting experiences that, part of what we asked them to do is what could you bring, what experience could you bring? And I think folks that have been in the private sector, that have been doing this work for a while in their business, in the companies or whatever, and they wanna bring some of that knowledge to the group, and I thought that was some really, really good, candidates there as well.
Do we have public comment on that? No? Okay. All right. Well, I'm sad to get to the end as we go about the 40th meeting we have had since July 1st.
Well, we still have informational items, we're not at the end yet.
I know, I'm
Yeah,
just
we're
pacing.
We're close.
All info items, that is my own actual info item there, but Dr. Marston, do you have any informational items you want to talk to us about first?
Just a couple, yes. In your materials, you had the projections for K-5 class sizes for next year. We usually do this around this time of year. Of course, we will have move-ins as we normally do in the summertime, but just give you a sense of where we are. Full day kindergarten, we'll have 5 sections of 21 and 3 sections of 22. Half day, 1 section of 15, 1 section of 8, and typically we've closed out full day, so any students that move in at that grade level in kindergarten will go right into half day, so those numbers always go up over the summer. First grade, 3 sections of 19, 4 sections of 20, and 2 sections of 21. Second grade, 3 sections of 23, 4 sections of 22, and 2 sections of 21. Third grade, 1 section of 20, 2 sections of 21, 5 sections of 22, and 1 section of 23. Fourth grade, 6 sections of 21 and 9 sections of 22, and then fifth grade, 6 sections of 22 and 3 sections of 21. So we're trying to stay within that ballpark that we've always tried to stay in, 18 to 22 if we can. And I think that's where we are right now. I mean, we'll continue to monitor this over the summer. If we have an influx in a certain grade, which has happened, it happened a few years ago.
Oh, I know it.
You know that. So we'll continue to monitor that. If we have to add a section or look for a teacher, we'll need to do that. Hopefully we won't need to, but, you know, we can't predict with 100% how many kids we're gonna have based on the summertime move-ins. So I know we always do that. I wanted to just give you a heads up on that so you have that
Thank you.
information. And then the other items were just, we thought we had our last one, but a letter of withdrawal from the PRS complaint from December. A parent had done that, and that was withdrawn, and Desi wanted to let us know. And then we had 2 public records requests from citizens, and then another citizen email that I put in there. So just informational items for you folks to have, just so you're in the loop with what's going on.
Okay.
And I just want to say, I know we're at the very last part of informational, I just want to thank everyone for coming to graduation, and it was, even though it was a very, very, very hot day, just so proud of our kids. It was certainly a senior weekend where we had the cruise on Friday night, which was absolutely perfect weather, kids were great and behaved wonderfully as they always do. And then the parade on Saturday with a party in the park, and then the culmination event of the graduation. So it's busy, but it's awesome. So I just want to thank everyone for that. It was great, it was just great.
You looked pretty snazzy from the picture.
And that's all I have, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, it's so difficult to express in any even moderately accurate way. Just the appreciation I think all of us have for the staff, for the parents who were able to pull together so much for our seniors this year, and for just the community. I mean, we're not at the end, but I think that we're starting to we're seeing a lot more light than we were before, and I think it's an important time. I think that we're all starting to feel like, okay, we made this part, and there's really no adequate way of expressing certainly my personal thanks to the staff that I have had the pleasure to interact with this year. My one info item is that first of all, this is my first meeting that is not remote in my career as chair, but is also our 40th meeting this year. I think I mentioned that already. And because of that, I will make all efforts humanly possible and responsible to have any meetings in July. I think that traditionally we have not had any meetings during the summer. If there is any way that we can not meet in July, it is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's time to rest and reset.
Yes. So, Tim, Anna Mae, are there items you'd like to add, or would you just like to skip out of here as quickly as humanly possible?
Just, I you know, that big senior weekend, it just, you know, seeing all, you know, multi-generations helping at Party in the Park, you know, and I think, and people from all over town, and I think, you know what, I get kind of like, this is almost like transcending in terms of we all share a common, you know, we all share that common denominator, which is the love of community. I mean, we all have crazy and we're, you know, we disagree on things. But then at that Party in the Park, I just thought, I don't know, I get a little sentimental. And I think, all right, this is why we're anchored here. This is why we feel so passionate about things. But I really loved it. It was very symbolic, as well as a tangible thing for our seniors. You've got a senior, you've got a senior. You know, I was very happy for them and happy for their families. So I'm very grateful to this community, profoundly.
And our juniors were able to have a prom as well, which is fantastic.
They sure were.
You know, I echo, I thought a little bit about today, but it was just gratitude. I mean, it's a word, Anna Mae, I think you use probably more than anybody, but just as the one committee member with the senior, I was so happy for her. I don't think you can do better for a senior than that weekend, and I mean, Saturday was amazing. A kid going through that Party in the Park, but you know, I think they've been on cloud 9. I think they'll look back on a really tough year. And, you know, I'm thankful. I said it to Jeff and Michael, and afterwards, just as a parent, thank you. My daughter went from K through 12, and that's been phenomenal. The Dale graduation today, we were at that's always a favorite of mine. I mean, it's a lighter graduation, but it's a very nice one. So extremely, extremely well done. And just gratitude from the folks on the committee. We've been through a tough year, right?
We've definitely been in our own foxhole.
You know, yeah, the two words, somebody said foxhole, a boss of mine has always said iron sharpens iron. And we've been through some challenges together. You know, I'm grateful for everybody that we're a part of. I think we've become closer, and I think we've become stronger, right? I mean, I think we've done the best we can this year. You know, with the tough hand that we were dealt, but I think the schools will be better years to come, just because I think as a group, we really, you know, we were probably more efficient. We had to be, I think, more effective, and you know, we're collaborating really well. So I think the high level is gratitude and you know, moving towards greatness is what I would share.
Well stated.
Thank you. And certainly we have had the benefit of our administrative team and of Dr. Marsden really pushing forward for kids all of the time. I don't think that there's a day, certainly not this fall or this winter, where Dr. Marsden wasn't saying, okay, but how are we gonna get them in more? What do we gotta do? How are we gonna make that happen? And just the hours upon hours of meetings to make that happen is just astounding. And so,
Yeah, no, we see it. Not everybody here, you know, sees it every day, that this kids comes first, and Jeff, that starts with you. I mean, it fills it and infuses it down, but we see, I mean, it's just part of everything we do.
But I hope the admin team can get some rest and reset as well, right?
or at least take your vacation time this year. I mean, just,
Yes.
you know.
Last summer, oh Lord.
Oh, you go. Okay.
So anyways, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I just wanted to keep you guys here until 9 if I could, and I've only got 7 more minutes to vamp. Okay, no, I'm kidding. All right, so future agenda.
Filibuster for 7 minutes.
My over-under was 8:30, but I...
Failed. All right, so mask policy manual project update will be on our next agenda, and then we will talk about student feedback. Our next regular meeting is August 26th at 7 p.m. And do I hear a motion to adjourn? Anna Mae O'Shea, do I hear a second?
Second.
Tim Knight, do I hear all in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. All right. The meeting is adjourned at
Just a-
8:53 p.m. And thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
you all. Thank you. Thank you, Andrea. You don't get nearly enough thanks. You are our anchor in the background. Thank you.
Whoa.